I never imagined my life would take such a sudden turn. It all started one evening when I came home from work. I pushed the front door open and immediately noticed something was different. Bags, piled up right by the entrance. My heart sank. I couldn't wrap my head around it. Why were there bags? It wasn't the sight of them that rattled me, but the message they carried. A message of change, one I wasn't prepared for. I stepped inside, cautiously, and called out for Michael. He was sitting in the living room, staring blankly at the TV, not even looking at me as I entered. "What's all this?" I asked, pointing at the bags. He didn't flinch. His response was as cold as his expression. "I've decided I'm moving in with my mom," he said, almost casually. For a moment, I thought I hadn't heard him right. "You're leaving me? Just like that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, not knowing what to feel yet. Anger, confusion, hurt? All of them swirled inside me as I waited for an explanation. "You don't keep the house the way it should be," Michael said, still not looking at me. "I've talked to my mom, and we've agreed that it's better if I live with her. You don't contribute the way I expect, and I need more support." His words hit me like a freight train. How could he say that? I worked full-time, paid for things around the house, and did my part, even if it wasn't always visible. "You're making this decision without even discussing it with me?" I shot back, my voice trembling. He shrugged, unmoved. "I don't need to discuss it. I pay for most of the bills, and I make the decisions." That hurt more than I could admit. It was like he had been holding this over my head all along, using it as leverage. I stood there, speechless, as my world crumbled in front of me. His mother's voice interrupted my thoughts, snapping me back to reality. "A wife who doesn't take care of the house is useless," she said, smiling smugly as if this was all part of some plan she had orchestrated. In that instant, I knew. I knew that nothing I did would ever be enough for them. They had made up their minds, and I was the outsider in my own home. But instead of breaking down, something inside me shifted. I had tried so hard to make things work, to be the wife they expected me to be. But this was my breaking point. "Fine," I said, my voice steady for the first time that evening. "If you want to leave, go ahead. But first, you're going to sign this." I reached into my bag and pulled out a set of divorce papers I had prepared weeks ago. I hadn't expected to use them this soon, but I was glad I had them. Michael's eyes widened in shock. "Divorce papers? When did you prepare these?" he asked, clearly not expecting this turn of events. "The day you told me to leave the house," I replied, keeping my voice calm, though my heart was racing. "I'm not waiting around for things to get worse." He stared at me, stunned, for a long moment before he finally signed them. I could see the hesitation in his eyes, but he knew this was it. Our marriage was over. As soon as he signed the papers, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It was over. I had fought for so long to make this marriage work, but now I was free. "I'll file these at the city office tomorrow," I said, my voice unwavering. "I'll get a moving company to collect my things, and I'll be out of here as soon as I find a new place." My mother-in-law tried to interject, shouting something about how I'd regret this decision, but I ignored her. I had no time or energy left for her. I packed up a few essentials, grabbed my bag, and left the house that night. I drove straight to my parents' house. They were shocked to see me at their doorstep so late, but they welcomed me without question. They could tell something had happened, and though I didn't have the energy to explain everything that night, they knew I needed their support. The next morning, I filed the divorce papers and began the next chapter of my life. It was a daunting step, but it felt right. For the first time in a long time, I felt in control. The days that followed were a whirlwind. I contacted a lawyer to ensure that everything would go smoothly with the divorce, especially regarding compensation for all I had endured. I also started looking for a new place to live, somewhere far away from the memories of my marriage. It wasn't easy, but I knew I had to move forward. I found a small but beautiful apartment that felt like a fresh start. It was modern, clean, and just the right size for one person. I felt a sense of excitement that I hadn't felt in years. On the day of the move, I returned to the house while Michael was at work. His mother was there, watching me like a hawk as the movers took my furniture and belongings. "You're taking everything?" she scoffed, clearly irritated. I didn't respond right away. I had expected her hostility, but it didn't bother me anymore. "These are things I bought with my own money," I finally said, my voice calm but firm. "They're mine, not his." She had no argument, but her frustration was obvious. I didn't care. I was reclaiming my life, piece by piece. Moving into my new apartment felt like a fresh start in every sense. The freedom I had was overwhelming, but in the best way. No more constant criticism, no more suffocating expectations. It was just me, in control of my life again. I threw myself into my work, putting in extra hours and pushing myself harder than I ever had before. It wasn't long before my efforts paid off. I got promoted, and my salary increased. I could finally focus on myself and enjoy the life I was building without having to worry about anyone else. For months, I lived in peace, enjoying my independence, but just as I was beginning to settle into this new chapter, the calls started. At first, I ignored them. My mother-in-law was persistent, though, and eventually I gave in and answered. "What do you want?" I asked, already exhausted by the thought of talking to her. "Please, can we talk?" she said, her voice softer than I had ever heard it. I couldn't help but feel suspicious. This woman had never been kind to me, so why now? "What do you want?" I asked again, my patience wearing thin. She hesitated, and then the story spilled out. Michael's affair had been exposed at work, and as a result, he had lost his job. Julie, the woman he had left me for, didn't want to live with his mother and had moved out. Now, without my financial support, they were struggling. "We're barely getting by," she said, her voice trembling. "Michael can't find steady work, and we need help. Please, can you send us money, just like before?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After everything they had put me through, she had the audacity to ask for money? I was speechless for a moment, trying to process the sheer nerve it took to make such a request. "No," I finally said, my voice firm. "I'm not sending you a single penny. You made your choice, and now you have to live with the consequences." I hung up the phone, feeling a mix of anger and relief. I had finally stood up to her, and it felt good. A few days passed, and I thought that was the end of it. But then one afternoon, as I was leaving work, I saw someone waiting outside. It was Michael. I hadn't seen him since the divorce, and I certainly hadn't expected to see him now. He looked disheveled and desperate, a far cry from the man who had once been so confident and self-assured. "Lauren, please, can we talk?" he said, rushing towards me as soon as he saw me. I stopped in my tracks, unsure of how to respond. "What do you want, Michael?" I asked, my voice colder than I intended. He launched into a story about how everything had gone wrong after the divorce. His affair had been exposed, Julie had left him, and he was struggling to find work. "I made a mistake," he said, his voice full of regret. "Can we start over? Please, I need you." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After everything he had done, after the way he had treated me, he had the nerve to ask for a second chance? I stared at him, trying to process his words. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. But then I remembered everything I had gone through. The emotional abuse, the constant criticism, the way he had discarded me like I didn't matter. I wasn't the same person I had been before. I was stronger now. "No, Michael," I said firmly. "We can't start over. You made your choices, and now you have to live with them. I've moved on, and you need to do the same." He looked at me, his eyes full of desperation, but I didn't waver. I turned and walked away, leaving him standing there on the sidewalk. It was the final goodbye. I knew he wouldn't be coming back this time. As I drove home, I felt a sense of closure wash over me. I had finally put the past behind me, and it felt liberating. After that encounter with Michael, I knew it was time to fully embrace my new life. I had spent so much time looking back, but now I was ready to move forward. I started focusing more on my hobbies, reconnecting with old friends, and even considering the possibility of dating again. It wasn't easy, but I was determined to live my life to the fullest. Work was going well, and my personal life was starting to fall into place. I had built a life for myself, one that didn't depend on anyone else. It was empowering, and I cherished every moment of it. I was finally free from the toxic relationship that had held me back for so long, and I was thriving. Just when I thought everything had settled down, something unexpected happened. I received a letter in the mail from Michael's lawyer. He was suing me for spousal support, claiming that I had unfairly taken more than my share during the divorce. I couldn't believe it. After everything I had been through, after all the ways I had been wronged, he was still trying to take more from me. I contacted my lawyer immediately, and we prepared for the legal battle ahead. It wasn't just about the money. It was about standing up for myself and not letting him control me any longer. I was ready to fight, and this time, I wasn't going to back down. The court case dragged on for months, but in the end, justice was served. The judge ruled in my favor, and Michael's claim was dismissed. I couldn't describe the relief I felt when the verdict was announced. It was the final victory I needed to close that chapter of my life once and for all. As I left the courtroom, I realized how far I had come. I had been through so much, but I had survived, and I was stronger because of it. I no longer needed validation from anyone else. I was enough, just as I was. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly free.